Hi, I'm Roberto Marquez, and I started with 3D printing in June of 2014 with a printer bought Simple Metal. Up until recently, I've only been downloading .stl files from Thingiverse, so the next step for me in 3D printing was to make my own models. I wanted to start with something simple, and I was happy to find an Instructable that takes a 2D image and processes it with open source tools that create a 3D model that's fit for printing. In this video, I'll demonstrate that process and show how to make your own .svg paths to use with that 2D image to 3D model workflow from the Instructable. There's 3 different tools that are used in this process, all open source, and they use to manipulate the original image. And so they are G.I.M.P, the GNU image manipulation program, Inkscape, and a related plugin to OpenSCAD, which is the third open source tool. When this video was shot, there were install methods for both Linux, Mac, and Windows. In the video, I'll be demonstrating on Linux. And links in the video description are to installs for the software packages I just mentioned. So I want to show you what the output of this whole process, and they're very simple. Basically, 2D models with height. So this one here is a logo from local sports team here where I'm from, and so because they're scalar vector graphics, they can be sized up or down to what you want. You can get a little more complex with curves and shapes from this printout. Have printouts that are with more curves and shapes. I'm a fan of Rhett and Link's show Good Mythical Morning, so you may recognize this icon. And then you can get other 2D images of, say, Enderman or whatever your favorite character from Minecraft is. And so those are more simpler ones that take like maybe 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes to get through. And I was also able to, with this workflow and a bit of more manipulation, to get more complex prints like these sugar skulls, the calavera from, this one's just from the internet. I just found an image and used it. And here it is scaled down to a little bit smaller. And then again, Good Mythical Morning's icon is the the mythical fire-breathing chicken. And so there's a lot of little detail in here, especially with the rooster, that you're able to get out of this workflow. Okay, now I'll show you some before and afters. The before being the 2D image, and the after being the 3D model that was created with the workflow I mentioned earlier. So the first one I'll show is the Luigi, and from this image I used G.I.M.P to cut out just Luigi and create an SVG path, and I'll show more on how I did that in just a moment. And then so from that image I was able to obtain this 3D model, and it can be scaled up or down to however big your print bed is. And next I'll show the Enderman original. So this is what we originally had, and you'll notice there was color in there, so I had to remove that and then make the SVG path. And from that 2D, I got this model. And next I'll show the Rhett and Link face logo. And so this is just an image I found online. This one came as a PNG, and so I worked out a path from just the top part to print. And this is what the model looks like of that print. Okay. The next one is the last of the simple ones I'll show. And by simple I mean it just the time it takes to filter out all of the parts that aren't part of the path.
is not as much compared to the more complex ones I'll show in a bit. So this image, again, was just pulled from the internet. I'll have links to the originals in the video description or elsewhere. And so this image produced this model. I also did this one by hand. This is the first one that I didn't just take straight from an image. I had to actually make a path for all of the edges. And so I've done other stuff with this model too, like make rings. But yeah, that's the last of the simple ones. And let me show you the first of two complex ones, which is a sugar skull, again just taken from a hand drawing off the internet. And so I believe this was hand drawn. Yeah, so may have been CGI, but yeah, the same thing. I just took this one, took several passes, and through GIMP and getting all of the path, just of the path that I wanted out of it. And so that gives this model. This looks really cool in black and white filament. Okay, and so the last before and after I'll show is of the mythical fire-breathing chicken from Good Mythical Morning. And that came from, this one took many passes before I could get it to come out. This part wasn't too bad, but the chicken had a lot of, the rooster had a lot of different colors that I had to make one color. And yeah, I showed it in the beginning of the video. And so this one is the model for it. Again, I mentioned you might have to take several passes, especially for passes through GIMP to get the path right before you get something that's actually, totally solid for the 3D printer to slice. Now I'll demo the actual workflow. Again, it uses GIMP, Inkscape, OpenSCAD, and the first one I'll do is of the very basic square, just so you can get the idea of how to create something from scratch. And so I'm using GIMP and just going to create a new image, taking the defaults, and using the square tool, I'll select any area, and then from the select menu, I'll say to a path. And so over here in your paths, you see that I got this new one. This is what the actual print will be of. So now let me make sure I have my folder prepped. Probably shouldn't do that. Okay, so I'm just gonna get rid of all this. I'll come back over here and export it to that directory. Sorry, export path, and then you select the directory. So I'm on the desktop, and we'll just call it square.svg. And so there we are. That's the first step, is to get a path. And all it came from was this rectangle selection in GIMP. And so I'll quit that, and you can save this if you want, or if not, just close the window. The next part of the workflow is to open this SVG file in Inkscape. And at this point, you should have already installed the plugin for OpenSCAD that's mentioned in the description. If you haven't, you'll notice it under extensions, generate from path does not have this paths to OpenSCAD. So if you do see it, then you did that part right. So when you're going to generate an SCAD file, you need to tell it where. And so to keep things consistent, I'm going to put it in the same directory as the SVG file and call it square.scad file. And once you hit apply, it doesn't do anything other than that, so you have to hit close. And I'm just keeping things tight and close the windows as I go, and I don't want to save that. And so now we have an SCAD file, and with that we will use OpenSCAD to view the file and generate the actual STL file. I noticed that the menu options are a little bit different between Windows and the Linux versions, but for the first step you do need to, under the design menu, select compile and render. And so we got that very basic just rectangle in 3D now, and we'll have to select export as STL file to actually get it. And So it should have placed it in the same directory as the other two files. Yeah, there it is, STL file. And then I already have Repetier host open to see what would print from that 2D path we made. So next I'll show a little more involved one where you're taking an image from somewhere else and getting the model from there. And I'll use that Enderman picture that I showed earlier. So we see we already have a STL file, but I'm going to be naming this one after the file I got from the web, which is this weird 6LWFIKY. And so again, we'll start with GIMP. For this one, there is like one extra step, but it's not hard at all. So to get the path, you'll still select with the color, but you're going to select on this transparent area. So because I've selected that, I don't want to print the outside. What I need to do is select invert. So now I have the actual Enderman shape. And then select again to path, which gives it to us here. And we want to export that path. I like to do it in the same directory. And we'll keep the same name, but we'll call it SVG. With this SVG file, again, we'll open it with Inkscape to create a .scad file. Under the extensions, generate path from, paths to OpenSCAD. And again, this doesn't update the name of the file or the directory where it's placing it, but I had that on the clipboard. Just a bit, we'll get the OpenSCAD file, which is right here now, and we'll open that with OpenSCAD. If it seems like I'm going fast, it's just because I have some of this down by muscle memory now. I've done it so many times. But here you'll see the G code. And so the next step in this software is to do the compile and render. And I didn't take out the eyes, the color that was in the eyes and the mouth, so it's solid. But to get the STL file, I would just export it as this right here, .stl file. And it's already in the right directory. This one saves it. Good. And here's the original. Here's the one we just made. And it's ready to print in Repetier host. You can see you can get a bunch of these done in not too long. And the last one I'll show is of the ret and link face. I'm not going to crop off the bottom part, but you'll see that it's not that much different from the other ones we just did. So this was the original. Again, we'll open it in GIMP. And this one doesn't need the invert. We can just go straight to select by color, which was that one last time. And we'll get the face, and then we will select to path, which gives us this, and we will export that path. Okay, so we're going to call it this, but SVG. And we're done with GIMP for this file. Again, you can save it if you want to like take off more stuff. For example, that bottom ret and link, that will end up just printing unconnected letters. So after you get the SVG, again, you'll go to Inkscape so that you can export a .scad file through this extensions, generate path from, paths to OpenSCAD. This is the one that I wish would remember the output path, but it doesn't. Okay. There's the file itself. I'm gonna do a little more cleanup. And with the SCAD file, we open it with OpenSCAD. And for this, we will compile and render. And at first I was like, oh no, whenever I see all these warnings, it's going to end up being not a manifest file, a completely solid one. But if you're patient, you'll eventually see that this one particular one does print out. You know, because it says simple yes. And so there's, you know, how to do a little more complex one with this workflow. And if you give it several passes, you'll eventually get no floaters, which is the goal. So yeah, then just export as STL. And we'll load it up into the printer software, and you can print it now. One last thing I'll show in the workflow demonstration is about the you know, having to give it several passes. This is what I mean by that. Okay, so down here in the chicken, if I want to select my color, so it looks like I got everything, but if I go down to 800, this is just for the chicken. Like, this color is not that color, is not that color. So all of these colors, if you want them to be on the same path, have to be the same color. So you got to catch them all. One technique is to use the fill bucket and make sure you're doing.
In this video, I'll show how to make 3D models fit for printing from 2D images. Next for me is to try to create 3D models with curves in the Z-axis, and maybe create a contoured mask that you can wear out of this skull print. And one last thing is this technique uses 3 different tools and has 3 different steps. And if you know how to do this using just one of those tools or one other different open source tool, then please mention it in the comments. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for more.